Dad, can I stand on the balcony for a little while? Lily asked, pulling her mother's long flowing shawl around her shoulders. It was a soft, pale lavender, still carrying a faint whisper of her mum's signature jasmine scent. Of course, sweetie, but not for too long. It's getting pretty chilly out there, her father Arthur replied, his voice gentle. The little girls stepped out onto the wrought-iron balcony of their old brownstone, its facade adorned with intricate stone carvings and graceful bas-reliefs. She inhaled deeply, the crisp evening air carrying the sharp, invigorating scent of young maple leaves from the trees lining the street below. From the bustling bistro on the ground floor of their building, the warm hum of music and soft, convivial laughter drifted up. Below, in the glow of vintage streetlights, a few scattered pedestrians hurried past, their collars pulled high against the cooling air. The allure of the evening city held Lily spellbound. She could spend hours watching sleek, dark cars pull up to the restaurant's ornate entrance. Out of them would spill elegantly dressed women, their figures wrapped in luxurious cashmere or shimmering silk shawls, as they ascended the wide marble steps. Lily often dreamed that when she grew up, she would definitely visit that very restaurant, right below their apartment, a place of mystery and glamour. Their spacious, high-ceilinged apartment was a legacy from her grandfather, a distinguished professor of chemistry at a prestigious university. He had willed it to his daughter Valerie, Lily's mother, who in turn had added her husband Arthur and their baby daughter to the deed. But when Lily was just 3, her vibrant young mother had fallen ill, swiftly succumbing to a sudden, cruel sickness. All that remained of her now was a beautiful fading photograph in a gilded frame. Valerie and David, young and radiant, locked in an embrace. David, handsome in a crisp charcoal grey suit and blindingly white shirt, and Valerie, luminous in a creamy lace wedding gown, her neck graced by a stunning ornate diamond necklace that glittered like frozen starlight. There was also her mother's favourite lavender shawl, which Arthur had kept when he'd given away her other belongings to her closest friends. The heartbroken widower had been left to raise their little girl alone. Arthur worked as a paramedic for the city's emergency services, and on weekends he picked up extra shifts writing medical articles for private clinics. Despite his constant workload, their small family often struggled to make ends meet, the expenses of maintaining a grand professor's apartment and daily needs often stretching their budget thin. But Arthur poured every ounce of his remaining energy into Lily, who suffered immensely without her mother. For months after her passing, Lily would stand by the front door in the hallway for what felt like an eternity, her small face pressed against the peephole, clinging to the desperate hope that her mummy would soon return. And before bed, she'd often start to cry, her small voice asking, "Why didn't she come home?" Arthur tried to distract her as best he could. If he found a few free hours, they would invariably spend them together. They'd wander through the leafy paths of Central Park, ride the subway to a children's theatre, or visit his childhood hometown, a quaint farming village upstate, to see her grandma. Though sometimes, even there, her dad would manage to pull out his laptop and dive back into work. Today, however, had been different. Today, they had celebrated Lily's 8th birthday. They'd ordered delicious takeout from their favourite Italian place, bought a colourful rainbow cake, and even invited a merry clown with a unicorn. Of course, all her little friends from school had been invited too. After the guests had finally departed, she and her dad swiftly cleared the table, washed the dishes, and then each retreated to their own rooms. But sleep wouldn't come for Lily. Her mind kept replaying the day, wondering how perfect it would have been if her mum had been there too. All the other kids in her class had mothers, but she didn't. To try and coax sleep, she decided to breathe in the cool evening air. As she leaned against the railing, inhaling the soft perfume of young leaves and a faint, sophisticated fragrance that seemed to cling to the air around the balcony, Lily suddenly heard strange sounds. She peered down through a gap in the balustrade and saw a young woman emerging from the restaurant, hunched over as if in pain. The stranger almost ran to the nearest maple tree, clutching its trunk as if afraid she might collapse. Lily, watching her closely, gasped. Around the woman's neck glittered a diamond necklace, exactly like the one her mother wore in her wedding photograph. Instantly, her father's words echoed in her memory, haunting and chilling. "That necklace, it's what killed your mother." Quietly, Lily called out, her voice small, almost swallowed by the night. "Mum, are you okay? Are you feeling sick?" The woman looked up, startled, her gaze unfocused, apparently not immediately seeing the small figure behind the ornate railing. "Who's there?" she rasped. "My name is Lily. I'm up here on the balcony," the girl replied a little louder. "Oh," the woman gasped, clutching at her throat. "Oh, I feel so nauseous." "It's because of your necklace," Lily suddenly declared, her child's bluntness cutting through the night. "I would never wear something like that." The stranger instinctively clutched her neck, her eyes widening. "What are you saying? This is a costly piece of jewellery. My husband just gave it to me an hour ago for our wedding anniversary." The woman leaned her head against the tree, bracing herself with her hands. "Oh God, I feel awful." "Maybe I should call you a doctor?" Lily offered, her concern genuine. The stranger shook her head weakly. "My dad works as a paramedic," Lily persisted. "Maybe he can help you. Come on up to our apartment." The little girl pointed to her right. "Our building entrance is right there. Go in and take the stairs to the left. Apartment 7. The woman looked at Lily distractedly, swayed on her feet and slowly shuffled towards the entrance. A minute later, the doorbell chimed. "Dad, it's that lady!" Lily cried, rushing into the living room, her eyes sparkling with frantic excitement as she pointed back towards the front door. Arthur looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowed in mild confusion. "What lady, sweetie?" "The one with the same necklace Mum wore at her wedding." "What?" Arthur's easy smile vanished. He pushed back from his desk chair, a jolt of apprehension shooting through him, and hurried towards the entryway. The woman, who had barely crossed their threshold, had already darted towards the slightly ajar bathroom door, closing it quickly behind her. Arthur looked at his daughter, bewildered. "Lily, maybe you can explain what's going on?" Lily pressed a tiny finger to her lips, her voice a hushed whisper. "Just look at her necklace, Dad." Finally, the strange guest emerged from the bathroom. Her face was pale, drawn with sickness, and her movements were unsteady, as if the floor beneath her swayed. Arthur reached out a hand, steadying her, and gently guided her to the living room. "Please have a seat," he urged, his paramedic instincts kicking in. "Actually, perhaps it would be better if you lay down. What's your name?" "Irene," the guest rasped weakly, her voice thin. "Let's get that necklace off so it's not bothering you," Arthur said, his movements swift and practiced. "There, that's better. Okay, I'm going to get you some activated charcoal, and we're definitely calling an ambulance." "What?" Irene's eyes, clouded with pain, drifted aimlessly across their faces. "It's a medication for poisoning," Arthur explained concisely, his tone calm despite the urgency. He carefully placed the diamond necklace into a resealable plastic bag, a glint of cold recognition in his eyes, and then strode quickly towards his medical kit. He knew Irene needed immediate detoxification. That necklace. It was undeniably identical to the one his wife's friend had given her on their wedding day. Arthur and Valerie had met in medical school, both sharing a bright-eyed dream of working as paramedics, of racing against time to save lives. They'd attended lectures together, spent countless late nights poring over textbooks in the hushed aisles of the university library, their bond deepening with every shared aspiration. However, their budding friendship was unexpectedly interrupted by Catherine, a girl from an old money family. Catherine yearned for her medical degree with one singular goal: to conquer the medical business world. She hadn't yet decided if she would open upscale cosmetic clinics or cutting-edge diagnostic centres, but she knew one thing for sure: her father would endorse any of her grand ideas and, of course, provide the hefty start-up capital. More importantly, she desperately wanted to win Arthur's heart, but he, as if blind to her charms, paid her absolutely no mind, his focus solely on Valerie. Catherine seethed with resentment towards Valerie, a completely unremarkable girl. She'd scoff, despite Valerie being a professor's daughter. "Honestly, I don't know how anyone could be such a bookworm," she'd sneer, exhaling a plume of delicate cigarette smoke as she spoke of Valerie. "With her dad's connections, I certainly wouldn't dress like such a frump." Her classmates, nodding in agreement with Catherine, exhaled fragrant wisps of smoke, while Catherine meticulously plotted how to steal the handsome Arthur away from the detested Valerie. One of her friends suggested showering him with attention, but that strategy proved utterly useless. Catherine then decided a more cunning approach was needed: befriending Valerie. She began by asking Valerie to explain complex concepts in their coursework, feigning confusion. Then she extended an invitation to her birthday party. "Can I bring Arthur with me?" Valerie asked, a hint of hope in her voice. "Sure, bring whoever you want," Catherine chirped, trying to sound nonchalant, a small, triumphant giggle escaping her lips. Her beloved Arthur would finally be coming to her house. Catherine was a gracious hostess. No one left the party without a sweet treat to take home. "She really is something, isn't she, Catherine?" Arthur remarked, walking Valerie home later that night. "She gave us such a lovely evening." "She did," Valerie agreed, squeezing his hand. "When else would you ever dance with me? We never go anywhere except libraries." "Oh, Valerie, do you really want to be running around to dances?" Arthur asked, surprised. No, I was just kidding," she smiled, pressing herself closer to him as they walked side by side. Not long before they finished medical school, Valerie realised their relationship had gone further than she'd ever imagined. She was pregnant. Valerie's father, still alive then, immediately declared that Arthur, as an honourable man, must marry his daughter. "Dad, he will definitely marry me, but right now we need to finish our studies, get through our residencies and all that. We'll just move in together for now." Her father grumbled at modern sensibilities for a long time, but eventually allowed the young couple to settle into his spacious apartment. Arthur proved to be an incredibly caring, if unofficial, husband, and soon after a devoted father. Valerie's labour had been difficult. For the first few months, the young father had to push himself hard, juggling his work with caring for his wife and newborn daughter. And then Valerie's father, the professor, fell ill himself. It happened shortly after the owner of the restaurant located directly beneath their apartment, had paid them a visit. "I have a very lucrative offer for you," he had announced almost from the threshold. "I plan to buy out all the apartments in this building and convert the space above my restaurant into a boutique hotel. I'm prepared to offer generous compensation for you to relocate. Enough for you to buy a beautiful house in a quiet suburban community." The professor listened calmly as his unwelcome guest, the restaurant owner, laid out his proposal. Then a sudden, booming roar erupted from him. "Get out! I have no intention of selling this apartment, which I earned through special service to this country, service that people like you have systematically dismantled." The restaurant owner's eyes narrowed, darkening with a malevolent glint, and he retreated, a sneer twisting his lips. But as the door closed, the professor clutched his chest. He suffered the first heart attack of his life right there in his hallway. From that day on, his health steadily declined. He frequently called Arthur and Valerie to his side, his voice frail but firm. "I beg you," he had pleaded, his gaze earnest, "marry quickly and do not sell it, no matter how much money they offer you." Arthur and Valerie decided to marry when Lily was 3. Her grandfather was in such fragile health that they knew it would be his last chance to witness their union, so the family began preparing for the intimate ceremony. Catherine was the bridesmaid, a seemingly loyal friend to Valerie. Catherine was still part of Valerie's life, though after Lily's birth, she understood that her chances of stealing Arthur were now infinitesimally small. Yet a fierce desire for revenge against Valerie for shattering her dreams still simmered within Catherine. She visited their home almost every day, playing with little Lily, helping Valerie with household chores, behaving to all outward appearances like a devoted friend. In truth, she was already deep in a sinister conspiracy with the restaurant owner, who had never abandoned his ambition to acquire all the apartments in the building. Only the professor's family and a couple of elderly veterans, their homes imbued with history, had refused the restaurateur's lucrative offers. Catherine's task was to eliminate one of those remaining obstacles. The restaurateur had instructed her to place an unusually beautiful necklace on the bride, a piece of intricate design featuring a large central diamond surrounded by smaller, metallic-coloured floral accents. "What are these stones?" Catherine had asked, her voice trembling. "Don't even think about touching them," the businessman had warned, his tone chillingly severe. "That's arsenopyrite, a mineral terribly poisonous. But no one will ever suspect it was that caused the harm. Let her wear it for a little while, then discreetly take it off. Otherwise, it's the end for both of us." Catherine spent the entire night before the wedding trembling with fear, like a leaf caught in a hurricane. How would she present this deadly necklace to Valerie? How would she convince her to wear it? And how could she place it on her friend's neck without accidentally touching the lethal stones herself? But everything seemed to fall into place effortlessly. Valerie's wedding gown featured a graceful open neckline that beautifully showcased her delicate shoulders. Catherine, feigning casual observation, remarked, "You know, something feels like it's missing from your look. Here, try this on." With practiced ease, she deftly pulled the necklace from her purse and carefully fastened the clasp around Valerie's neck, her fingers expertly avoiding the dangerous stones. "Well, how do I look?" "Oh, Catherine!" Valerie exclaimed, her eyes sparkling, as she traced the intricate design with her fingers. It's absolutely stunning. Where did you get this?" "Oh, just a fan gave it to me," Catherine replied, a tight smile on her face. "You can give it back after the wedding, okay?" "Of course, Catherine, thank you." Valerie twirled in front of the full-length mirror, catching Lily's delighted gaze. "Do you like it, sweetie?" Lily, a tiny flower girl in her pristine white dress, nodded excitedly. "Mummy looks so beautiful," Lily would often recall, years later. "Her dress, her hair, like a fairy tale princess." As the wedding reception reached its peak and the radiant couple finished a joyful waltz, Valerie suddenly faltered. She began to complain of intense nausea, a suffocating feeling, and difficulty breathing. She whispered to Arthur, asking him to escort her outside for fresh air. "Listen, Valerie, you're not pregnant again, are you?" Arthur asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "I don't think so, Arthur. There haven't been any changes. Everything was normal until this morning. It's just, I keep smelling garlic. Do you smell anything?" Arthur sniffed the air, confused. "No, not really, and why would I? There's no garlic dishes on the buffet." But Valerie sniffed again, insistent, repeating that she could distinctly smell garlic. Then abruptly she began to slump to the sidewalk. Arthur caught her, easing her onto a nearby park bench. "That's it, I'm calling an ambulance," he declared and rushed back inside, remembering his phone was in his jacket pocket. When he sprinted back to his wife, a crowd of guests and bridesmaids had already gathered around her. Catherine, meanwhile, stood by, her eyes wide with feigned astonishment, crying out, "What's wrong with her? Someone help her!" The ambulance crew arrived remarkably quickly. Valerie was carefully placed on a stretcher and loaded into the vehicle. Only then did Arthur notice it. The necklace, the stunning, ornate diamond piece, was no longer around his wife's neck. He desperately questioned everyone, but the bewildered guests merely shrugged, none recalling seeing it. At the hospital, doctors fought valiantly for Valerie's life, but the young patient tragically passed away without regaining consciousness. The cause of death was vague, unsettlingly so. Poisoning by an unknown gas. The peculiar circumstances surrounding Valerie's death sparked a flicker of curiosity within the authorities, but their initial investigations, exhaustive interviews, forensic scrutinies, dissolved into thin air, yielding no concrete answers. Arthur's fervent belief that the cursed necklace had played a fatal role in his wife's demise was gently but firmly set aside, dismissed as the raw, unreasoning grief of a man shattered by loss. Valerie's father, after burying his cherished daughter, suffered a second, devastating heart attack. He lingered for another 6 months, his vibrant spirit dimming like a flickering candle, until he finally drifted away peacefully, rejoining his beloved girls, his wife and daughter, in eternal quiet. But Arthur found no peace. The chilling thought that the ominous piece of jewellery had somehow orchestrated his fate, a dark puppeteer pulling his strings, gnawed at him relentlessly. He vowed to himself that he would unearth the truth, no matter the labyrinthine path he had to tread. He started by tenderly questioning Lily, coaxing fragments of memory from her, trying to piece together how the necklace had appeared around Valerie's neck. In the dizzying chaos of wedding preparations, he hadn't even had a spare moment to discuss it with Valerie herself. When Lily, her tiny brow furrowed in deep concentration, finally recalled that Aunt Catherine had brought the sparkling piece, Arthur immediately tried calling Catherine, but her phone remained a silent, unanswering void. He then reached out to their old medical school classmates, desperate for any shred of information, and soon confirmed that Catherine had, quite conveniently, vanished overseas. Undeterred, Arthur plunged into geological research, poring over texts like a scholar possessed, meticulously dissecting information about lethally dangerous minerals. His persistence, a quiet, unyielding current, finally paid off. He pinpointed the very substance he suspected: arsenopyrite, often ominously dubbed arsenic pyrite. Comparing a crystalline image of the mineral he found online with a magnified detail from his cherished wedding photograph, the young paramedic's heart plummeted with a chilling certainty. His wife had been poisoned. Yet he still stood empty-handed, without official proof, no concrete thread to tie the deadly mineral to Valerie's untimely end. After ensuring Irene was stable and the paramedics were well on their way, Arthur immediately dialed Detective Reynolds, the lead investigator on Valerie's cold case. His voice, usually steady, vibrated with a newfound urgency as he declared he possessed a crucial piece of evidence. They agreed to meet without delay. Well, look what the cat dragged in," Detective Reynolds drawled, his gaze sharp as he examined the necklace through the clear plastic bag. "You're sure this is the one? No doubles?" "As sure as I am that the sun rises," Arthur replied, his voice a low burning ember. "The one that etched itself into my nightmares. It killed my wife, and I highly doubt they're cranking these out like cheap baubles at a flea market. Strikes me as something ancient," the detective mused, turning the bag over, the diamonds catching the light like tiny cold eyes. "Could be straight out of a historical thriller, used to dispatch rivals at court." He paused, a flicker of something calculating in his eyes. "But how did it surface again? And how did it wind up on our patient?" "My daughter said the woman's husband gave it to her," Arthur explained, "as an anniversary gift." "Aha. Then our next step is clear as crystal. We find this husband," Detective Reynolds exclaimed, pushing himself up from his chair. The restaurant owner was nowhere to be found at his bustling establishment, but the young hostess, her face a mask of nervous politeness, confirmed that a couple had indeed been celebrating an anniversary there that evening. The woman had reportedly felt unwell, stepped outside for air, and then simply vanished into the urban night. "And her husband? He didn't go chasing after her like a man possessed? Didn't even file a missing persons report?" Detective Reynolds pressed, his voice tightening. The hostess fidgeted, shrugging her shoulders, a picture of helpless bewilderment. "I wouldn't know, sir. It was all a bit of a whirlwind. The security team was scrambling, checking every nook and cranny. Then that gentleman had a quiet word with the owner and he just left, smooth as silk." "Clear as mud, you mean?" Detective Reynolds growled, a dangerous edge in his tone. "All right, let's have the owner's home address." The young woman visibly shrank, then quickly rattled off an address in an exclusive suburban enclave, a place where secrets likely hid behind manicured hedges. The restaurateur answered the door in a lavish terry-cloth robe, his bare feet padding on the polished marble. He looked as if he'd just emerged from a leisurely bath. With a forced smile, he offered them a drink, a false geniality coating his words. "I don't drink on duty," Detective Reynolds clipped, his gaze unwavering, and immediately launched into questions about his patrons. When the restaurateur owner finally grasped who the detective was inquiring about, his face blanched, losing all colour, and he began to stammer, feigning utter ignorance. But the detective, his voice a low, steady threat, warned that if he had to locate the man himself, the restaurateur would face charges for obstructing justice. Under that ominous cloud, the owner not only divulged the visitor's full name, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, but also pinpointed their secluded, sprawling residence. "Now, just so we're clear, my acquaintance with him is strictly casual," the owner blurted, practically bouncing on his seat, a torrent of anxious words. "So if he tries to pin anything on me, no, it's a bald-faced lie." "We'll get to the bottom of it," Detective Reynolds replied tersely, and with that he and Arthur stepped out of the opulent mansion, leaving the anxious owner behind. "Something's rotten here, that's for sure," the detective sighed, running a hand over his tired face. "He's holding back a lot more than he's letting on. Come on, let's get back to the car." When Detective Reynolds and Arthur pulled up to Irene's sprawling modern house, a sleek structure of glass and dark wood nestled discreetly behind manicured hedges, her husband, Lorenzo, was already there. He was moving with a desperate, almost feverish energy, flinging expensive leather duffel bags into the cavernous trunk of a gleaming obsidian black SUV. "Going somewhere in a hurry?" Detective Reynolds inquired, his voice cutting through the crisp morning air like a cold blade. Lorenzo flinched, then stammered, "Just on business. An urgent trip." But before he could spin a more elaborate lie, 2 pairs of strong hands were on him, his arms deftly secured. He was unceremoniously yet efficiently guided into the back seat of the detective's cruiser, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed his crumbling freedom. "You can take that trip another time," Detective Reynolds stated grimly, his gaze as hard and unyielding as granite. "Say, in about a decade or so." "What is this lunacy?" Lorenzo shrieked, his composure shattering like cheap porcelain. "By what right do you—" His words dissolved into a frantic, incoherent sputter. The interrogation that followed was a stark, unflattering unravelling of Lorenzo's tangled web of deceit. It was revealed that he had plunged headfirst into a dark abyss of gambling, losing an astronomical sum that made the seasoned detective's eyebrows rise. To settle his crushing debts, he'd taken out a massive, ill-advised loan, foolishly listing his wealthy young wife as the guarantor. But the interest, like a venomous vine, had wrapped itself around his finances faster than he could ever hope to untangle. Desperate, he'd borrowed more, scrambling for money from a rogues gallery of dubious creditors, eventually slithering to the familiar restaurant owner for a lifeline. The restaurateur, a man who abhorred genuine lending, offered a chilling alternative. Eliminate his wife, liquidate her considerable assets, and then disappear across international borders, a ghost of his former life. At first, the idea had struck Lorenzo as monstrous, a dark seed of pure evil. He hadn't married Irene solely for her money. A part of him, a small part though, genuinely found her alluring. But when the creditors, their patience worn thin, metaphorically pressed him against a wall, their threats sharp as switchblades, he buckled. He caved to the horrifying conspiracy. And so, the restaurateur, with an almost ritualistic flourish, had presented him with the antique family heirloom, that very necklace, the same piece that had poisoned Valerie. He meticulously explained how to handle it, a whispered tutorial in silent, undetectable murder. Lorenzo's hands had trembled like autumn leaves in a gale as he fastened the intricate clasp around Irene's unsuspecting neck. All evening his gaze was glued to her, a suffocating weight of fear and burgeoning guilt pressing down on him. When she had mentioned needing to use the restroom, he had nearly convulsed with pure terror. He had envisioned her collapsing in the quiet solitude of the ladies' room, imagined the agonizing charade he'd have to perform, wringing his hands, feigning inconsolable grief, a masterful performance for an audience of strangers. But then Irene had simply vanished. A fresh wave of icy panic had washed over him, a cold dread that clung to his skin. She was gone, and with her the priceless, deadly necklace he was supposed to return to the restaurateur. Lorenzo had turned the entire restaurant upside down, mobilizing every staff member, swearing he'd find her, or at least the necklace, even if he had to tear up the very cobblestones of the city. Nothing. His frantic, desperate search was utterly fruitless. Calling the police was out of the question, a call that would expose his heinous plot. And the notion that his wife, in her disorientation, might have ascended to a stranger's apartment? The thought wouldn't have even flickered in his panicked mind. So, all his frantic efforts led nowhere but deeper into his own web of fear. Meanwhile, in the quiet, sterile sanctuary of the hospital, Irene was slowly but surely regaining her strength. The timely intervention by Arthur, his quick thinking a beacon in the chaos, followed by swift IV fluids and restorative medications, were doing their work, knitting her back to health with each passing hour. Soon she declared she was ready for discharge, her voice gaining its former clarity. The doctors, however, advised a few more days of rest and observation, so Irene remained in the hospital a little longer, allowing her body and spirit to truly mend. When Arthur visited with Lily, a warm, genuine smile lit her face, chasing away the last shadows of illness. "Hello, my heroes," she said, her eyes shining as she looked at Arthur, then at the bright-eyed Lily. "I honestly don't know how things would have ended if it weren't for your daughter. She's truly an angel, a little beacon in the night." "I think your guardian angel simply gave her a nudge to step out onto that balcony that night," Arthur replied, a gentle smile touching his lips, his gaze softening as it met Irene's. They arranged to meet at a cosy downtown cafe after her discharge, a simple promise that felt profoundly significant. Arthur waited for that meeting with a quiet eagerness he hadn't felt in years, a fluttering in his chest like a long dormant bird taking flight. Irene had, quite unexpectedly, captivated his heart, though a part of him still wrestled with the notion that she'd never be interested in a simple paramedic like him. Yet Irene proved to be wonderfully, refreshingly down to earth, her spirit unburdened by artifice. After their coffee at the cafe, a casual meeting that stretched into endless conversation, they wandered through the blossoming spring city, lost in comfortable chatter, words flowing between them like a gentle, meandering river. Before parting ways, she stood on tiptoes, a spontaneous gesture, and pressed a soft kiss to the corner of his lips. Then she playfully pecked Lily's nose, her touch feather-light, and waved goodbye. "Well, bye for now. See you soon." They met often, their connection deepening with each shared moment, like threads intertwining into an unbreakable rope. Yet neither could quite bring themselves to voice the most important words. how good it felt to be together, how much they missed each other in the interim, and how they never wanted to be apart again. When the investigation finally concluded and Lorenzo received his just sentence, a dark shadow fading from their lives, and Irene's divorce petition was approved, Arthur finally took the leap. His heart in his throat, he told her he loved her more than life itself. "Oh, finally!" she breathed out in relief, a joyous laugh bubbling up from deep within her, pure and uninhibited. "I was starting to think I'd have to say it first." They decided against a lavish, traditional wedding. After all, each of them had already experienced that kind of grand celebration. There was no need to repeat it, no need for fanfare. Their love was quieter, deeper. They simply signed the papers at the local courthouse, a tender, private moment, and then modestly celebrated their union in the warm embrace of their closest friends and family, the room filled with genuine smiles and heartfelt blessings. And from that very first day, Lily, her heart bursting with happiness she hadn't known since her mother's passing, called her Mum Irene. When Irene, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy, gently told Lily she would soon have a baby brother, the little girl threw her arms around Irene's neck, clinging tight, and wept tears of pure, unadulterated happiness, her small body trembling with overwhelming delight.